It's the first relationship most of us have. It is the relationship we have with our parents. And how does this relationship impact us and affect us as we get older and merge into adulthood? Here to spot the signs that your relationship with your parents could have had some traumatic effect on you is psychologist Dr. Jenny Yip. Dr. Yip, welcome back to Med Circle. Lovely to see you.
Same here. Happy to be here, Kyle.
Let's talk about some of these signs. I'll let you lead us off with the first sign that your relationship with your parents could have impacted you into having some trauma around relationships in the future.
Well, I think it's important to define what it means to be traumatized in a relationship with your parents, right? I think we first have to recognize that this doesn't mean that mom just yelled at you, right?
Mhm.
It's not mom just yelled at you one time and oh no, now I'm traumatized. When we're thinking about trauma that children experience, we're talking about serious stuff. So, and it doesn't even have to be directed directly at you. It could be experienced vicariously from what you observe. So, for example, if you constantly observe your parents fighting all the time. They're screaming on top of their lungs. There might be physical abuse between the parents, and you're there to observe it. Well, that is your first role model of what relationships are supposed to be like. And of course, that's going to affect you later on in your viewpoints about relationship. However, other types of trauma that can be experienced could be like if there's addiction in the family, if one of the parents, suffers from addiction, then that is going to shape your beliefs about relationships as well. It could be something that we all recognize, which is direct abuse, whether it's emotional abuse or physical abuse or even sexual abuse. That definitely will trigger a lot of trauma. So, trauma can be experienced in many different ways, and depending on how a child experiences it and then form their belief system about it, that will determine your experiences in future relationships.
Are there any signs that you would consider more hidden? When I hear something like physical abuse in the household, I understand that, yeah, there would be some impact and some traumatic impact from witnessing that. But is there anything that's happening where maybe you wouldn't even recognize that as trauma until it was uncovered for you?
Yeah, so, I think the classic example is the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, emotional abuse. However, invisible trauma occurs when, for example, if you have a parent who's constantly making backhanded comments at you, constantly criticizing you, constantly comparing you with other kids and shaming you and guilt tripping you, telling you how unworthy you are. Those are the invisible traumas that could occur that we don't see. It's
Yeah.
it's not as overt. But there's definitely this implicit message that you're not valuable, you're not worthy, you're not good enough, and, that's kind of hard for a child to hear, especially from your parents who are supposed to be your protectors, supposed to be your primary caretakers. That's definitely going to interfere with your beliefs about your world and yourself.
Yeah. I have so many questions around this. I think to help illustrate the impact of our upbringing, let's move into three signs that could indicate that you have experienced trauma in a relationship with your parents.
Yeah,
What would be a first hallmark sign of that?
I don't know that I can just come up with three. I'll try my best. I mean, there are so
Sure,
many signs. However,
sure.
I think one of the main signs is that you have difficulty with trust.
With
Because
what?
difficulty with trust.
With trust. Understood.
Yes, trust with other people because other people cannot be trusted, right? So if you have a parent who either abuses you overtly or abuses you invisibly, covertly, there's a trust issue that's going to develop. It's going to be problematic for you to be able to trust anyone if your early relationship, your primary relationship, is one where you don't feel safe. which then lends to the second issue is that you constantly don't feel safe. You don't feel safe in relationships. You don't feel safe confiding in other people. You don't feel safe getting close with other people. And you can imagine, the challenges you would have in forming even romantic relationships, right? Romantic relationships, even friendships. Friendships, how can you actually really trust this person and confide in this person? So trust, and feeling connected with other people, those are two primary characteristics. And, if you don't feel good about yourself, then your self esteem will probably tumble. You probably
Yeah.
don't have a great self image of yourself. This might develop into many different types of personality disorders, such as narcissism or histrionic personality or borderline personality or even avoidant personality, where you just don't feel comfortable being with other people.
It's interesting to me that two siblings can experience very similar upbringings, be raised in the same household, go to school, even have the same teachers, and experience their parents in very similar ways. Perhaps they have a very authoritarian parent and there was some traumatic incidences and upbringing, but one sibling is able to not experience the negative impacts of that as much or at all as an adult. And another sibling is over here really struggling with how they were brought up. Why do we see sometimes that discrepancy? What factors are at play here?
Biology,
Mm,
temperament, the environment that you grew up in is only part of the equation. How you experience your world depends a lot on biology and your temperament as well. I can take my twin boys, for example. They grew up in the same womb, and yet, because their temperament is so different, I have to interact with them differently.
mm,
And, if they both experience the same situation, they would have completely different perspectives of it. I
yeah.
always say one boy is very aversive, where the other one is very risk seeking. And just that in itself will create a different worldview for each of them. So,
Hmm.
siblings going through the exact same family environment, this exact same parenting style, may have completely different perspectives of their experiences that will form their beliefs of their world, other people, themselves. And that will determine their experiences in future relationships.
So if someone's watching this and they hear you say, "Oh, lack trust, low self-esteem, I don't feel safe," and they're nodding along going, "Yeah, that I see how that could stem from a relationship I had with one or both of my parents growing up." How do they begin to heal?
Well, I think first of all, we have to be able to connect our emotions, our thoughts, and our experiences. I think too often when we feel like we've been traumatized, we get disconnected. We disconnect from our emotions, from our thoughts, and then it's almost like I say it's always important for you to be in harmony with your thought, with your emotions, with your behaviors, right? The worst is if you believe one thing and think one thing, yet feel another, then do something that's completely discrepant to everything else, then you're a walking hypocrite, right?
Mm,
So the first thing that I would suggest is practice a lot of mindfulness. And I know, that word has been tossed around so many times that people start getting sick and tired of mindfulness, right? Though it's really important because mindfulness helps you to stay grounded and reconnect your emotions with your thoughts so that you are more in harmony. So
mhm.
that's the first thing I would do. Another thing that I would do is I would build my tolerance to uncomfortable emotions because emotions serve a purpose. They give us information of what's happening within ourselves. And rather than disconnecting from our emotions or being reactive to our emotions, learn from it. And if you learn from it, you're also tolerating your emotions even more. You're making room, you're making space for this uncomfortable emotion. And then lastly, what I would do is help myself um, identify those mind traps, those negative thinking pattern that gets us stuck and keeps us, trapped in this negative, vicious thinking to emotions. So these are the important things that we have to be able to help people with who are suffering from either visible or invisible trauma.
So I want to understand this a little bit better, Dr. Yep. Maybe we can use an example. So if we have people who are struggling with trust, low self-esteem, and they may not feel safe, let's say they run into a part of their relationship where their spouse is interacting with somebody that they're jealous of, that they may not trust, that they feel a little unsafe about, and that makes them feel like, hey, maybe I'm not worth that much, and it affects their low self-esteem. How would somebody without relationship trauma respond to that same scenario? And how would somebody with relationship trauma respond to that scenario?
Yeah, so someone without relationship trauma would acknowledge that as what it is, which is a work relationship. And that person may not even feel jealous because they feel secure in their relationship. And if they were uncertain about the quality of this relationship, they would probably open up a dialogue to discuss where what are the boundaries of this work relationship, right? In order to regain that sense of safety that we are protecting our marriage or partnership. Whereas a person who has experienced relationship trauma or, invisible trauma growing up, what they would feel is, I'm not good enough for you, which is why you have to go to this other relationship and abandon me. And therefore, the person might respond with aggression, might respond with passive aggressiveness, might respond with explosion, rage, or might just respond with a silent treatment. And all because they don't feel safe, they don't feel loved, they don't feel worthy in this relationship. And these are, unhealthy ways rather than opening up a dialogue to discuss the boundaries of your relationship. So those are two completely different scenarios. One would be the more productive one would be the one that will destroy your relationship.
Yes, and I love the emotions as a compass to our life. We have this body and we have built-in GPS ready to go, state of the art, and it's called our emotions. Dr. Lamb has taught me a lot and our Med Circle members about the power of being angry, an emotion that I try to avoid as much as possible and suppress when I probably should be looking at my compass a little bit and saying, why am I angry about this?
Yes.
Dr. Yup, it's any final thoughts on growing up with relationship trauma?
I think it's a rough area to kind of comprehend, especially when someone has experienced more of the covert, invisible trauma. Though I don't want people to feel like, well, now this has been done to me, and now I'm just stuck. This is the way I am. That is not a useful learning of your emotions and your experiences. And if we are to evolve to have a better quality of life, that means being able to take an inward look at ourselves, see where the problems are, using our emotions, like you said, as a compass to what we are experiencing, and learning from that, and then doing something about the negative thinking pattern. And
Yeah.
with all of that, you can be better.
Can't say it better than that. Dr. Yep, thank you. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel for mental health and psychology videos every week. I'm Kyle. Remember, whatever you're going through, you got this.